IFW Radio, another reason why freight is great.
Well, it looks like the weather's finally turned and the feel-good factor's rising high, and those big stories, well, they will just keep on coming. You're listening to IFW Radio, another reason why freight is great. I've always wanted to say that, another reason why freight is great. Apparently I didn't make it up, but I should have done. My name's Kizin Kwacha, and over the next couple of minutes I'm going to be handing you over to Damien Brett and Katerina Kerr, who will be bringing you a roundup of some of the big breaking stories in the world of freight and logistics. But before I do that, I just wanted to say that next week we're going to be at MultiModal in Birmingham, which, unless you've been living under a rock for the past 10 years, you'll know is one of the biggest exhibitions in the freight and logistics calendar. And talking about Birmingham, I was just going through the local papers to see if I can find any little stories that give us an idea of what the town's all about. And I came across this little gem. It turns out that Prince Charles, sorry, I've got to stand up and salute when I say his name. It turns out that Prince Charles had visited Birmingham a couple of years ago, and according to the local newspaper reports, he appeared wearing a hat which looked very much like a fox's head. Now, the mayor of Birmingham, being very discreet, you know, shook the prince's hand and said, "Your Grace, Your Highness, you look wonderful in your lovely suit and your nice cufflinks and your nice shiny shoes. But I'm a bit intrigued as to why you're wearing a fox's head as a hat." Prince Charles replied, "Well, this was my mother's idea, you see." And the mayor of Birmingham said, "Well, can you please explain, your lord, your graciousness, your honour, why did your mother, the Queen," so stand up and salute, "the Queen ask you to wear a hat that looks very much like a fox's head?" "Well," Prince Charles replied, and this is a true story, "Well," Prince Charles replied, "I was getting dressed in Buckingham Palace this morning when mother came in and asked me where I was going, and I told her I was going to Birmingham, and she replied, 'Wear the fox's hat.' You see," she replied, "Wear the fox's..." Where the fuck? Oh, I don't know why I bother. Anyway, listen, I'm going to be at MultiModal next week, so if you've got any funnier stories than that, which I very much doubt, tap me on the shoulder and tell me your story, and I promise I'll broadcast it to the world of freight and logistics. Now, that's what I call an offer you definitely can't refuse. Now, without further ado, let me hand you over to Damien Brett and Katerina Kerr for a week in the world of freight and logistics. You see, where the fox is... where... oh, never mind.
Hello and welcome to another weekly news roundup brought to you by www.ifw-nets.com. I'm Damien Brett, IFW's chief reporter, and joining me later will be Katerina Kerr, IFW's reporter. And now, next week actually, we've got a bit of a busy week coming up. I don't know how many of you guys are going along to this show, but it's MultiModal in Birmingham, which is one of the UK's biggest gatherings of the logistics industry. So it's going to be a busy week interviewing lots of people. We've got a film crew up there, so we're going to do some video interviews as well, so keep an eye on the IFW site for video interviews. Yeah, and also actually Kat will be going to IFW's sister publication, Containerisation International's yearly global liner shipping conference, which is being held in London. That's always a good one because they set the debates up, so there's a lot of crossover and differing views from shippers, and then the shipping lines, and then the ports, and also freight forwarders. So yeah, keep an eye out for Kat's report next week. So yeah, I don't know if you've heard this show before, but the way we do it is that first of all I pick a story of the week, and then Kat will bring you a roundup of the stories that you guys read from IFW, the most read stories from IFW's website last week. Yes, I may as well crack on. Now this week, just to be a bit different, well, I don't know if it's that different, but I'm going to be doing two stories instead of one. Actually, I think that's quite different. It's 100% different, isn't it, in terms of numbers? So yeah, I am being a bit different. This week I'm going to do two stories instead of one. That's just because on Friday we had a really cracking bulletin. I don't know if any of you saw it, probably, or maybe not. But in it there were some really good stories, and I was trying to decide between these two, and I just couldn't pick. So yeah, my two stories of the week. Firstly is one written by myself, of course, because everything I write is obviously great. Don't know about that, but anyway, and it's about European antitrust investigators who last week launched raids on the offices of Deutsche Bahn on the grounds that the German rail freight giant may have breached competition rules, which is really big news. There's been a lot of talk about a bit of a duopoly in the rail freight sector in Europe for a while now, so I don't know if there was much surprise or what from the industry, but you certainly should get a few people worried, I expect. Oh God, I can't speak today. Usually I struggle talking when I have some really difficult name from some guy based in the Middle East that I have to try and pronounce, but this week I can't even say simple words. Here we go again. The European Commission said it had reason to believe that DB may have breached European Union antitrust rules that prohibit the abuse of a dominant market position. They went on to say that EC officials undertook unannounced inspections at the premises of DB and some of its subsidiaries. And it added that it has been alleged that the DB Group, and in particular DB Energy, or it's kind of spelled with a European spelling, so it's DB Energy, the de facto sole supplier of electricity for traction trains in Germany, would be giving preferential treatment to the group's rail freight arm. The EC officials were accompanied by their counterparts from the German Competition Authority as well on the raids or unannounced inspections. But it's going to be this. I've got a feeling this story is going to be a bit of a recurring one on IFW's pages over the next few months, and it'll be interesting to see how it develops. I did actually phone DB Schenker to see if they had anything to say, and someone told me they would be back in touch with me, but that was early this morning, or early on Friday morning, sorry, I should say, because I record this on Friday afternoon, and this afternoon now, coming up to 3 o'clock, and still no response, so they don't seem that keen to talk about it. Now, the other big story of the week was one by our Asian correspondent, a guy called Mike King, who's a big Liverpool fan, in case you wanted to know our football allegiances. And he has written a report on congestion and labour problems that are causing major delays at DP World's terminal at Jawahar. Do you know what? I can normally say this port's name, but just because that I'm now doing it on audio and it's being recorded, I'm just struggling. The Western India Shippers Association told IFW a go slow by workers operating Nhava Sheva International Container Terminal this week had increased congestion. The same as that terminal is in Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust, which is India's leading container gateway. Sorry for everyone, that was a pathetic attempt to pronounce the port's name. The spokesman said inventory levels at the terminal were far beyond rated capacity. Export gates weren't functioning properly for some reason, Mike hasn't found out why, and 2 shipping lines calling at the terminal were refusing to accept export boxes at least until the middle of April. Spokesman for CMA CGM confirmed that container movements were limited in rabbit ears, while the situation at the very congested terminal had worsened due to the normal strong growth of exports in March. A spokeswoman for DP World said the congestion was caused by the pressure of increased volumes on the storage yard at the terminal, rather than dispute with workers. The labour issues were resolved on Monday, she said, and operations are back to normal. All the terminals are finding managing inventory challenging because of the pressure of volumes on the yard, especially with the oncoming monsoon season. DP World is working very closely with customers and the port to move cargo through as quickly as possible. So obviously a lot of people waiting and relying on cargo from India, and in particular that port, so any congestion there is going to have major implications for supply chains in Europe. Just before I hand over to Kat, I don't know if any of you read our April's Fool story on Friday. In fact, I'm not quite sure about April Fools, whether that is something that's just done in the UK or whether it's done in the rest of the world. But what it is, on April Fools, before midday on the 1st of April, which is known as April Fool's Day, everyone kind of plays practical jokes on each other, and it's become a bit of a tradition in the UK press to write false stories. So we wrote one about a new logistics company setting up a zero emissions service in London using a horse and cart. So in case you read that and you didn't know what April Fool's was and thought that was a true story, I can confirm that in fact it wasn't. Sorry to disappoint, but a good idea anyway. I mean, people talk of bringing back sailing ships. Why not bring back horse and carts? So anyway, I'll hand over to Kat now, and she's going to run through the top 5 most read stories of the week.
Thanks, Damien. Now to the top 5 most read stories of the week. And I'll jump straight in. But once again, making the top 5 stories of the week, but dropping from 3rd to 5th place with 799 views, its largest ro-ro vessel ever built has been launched. The Wilhelm Group has launched the largest ro-ro vessel to ever be built. The Tonsberg has a length of 265 metres and a cargo volume of 138,000 cubic metres over 6 fixed and 3 hoistable decks. The vessel, built by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, is part of the Mark V series of 4 vessels that will be delivered over the next 2 years. The second vessel will be delivered in August and the remaining 2 in 2012. The Mark V vessels use 15 to 20% less fuel per transported unit than their predecessors, thanks to an optimised hull and a number of energy-saving features such as a streamlined rudder design. And the 4th most read story of the week, with 856 views, is idle container fleet reaches lowest level in 2 years. According to figures released by Paris-based analyst Alphaliner, the number of vessels currently in layup dropped by 25 over the past month to reach a total of 84 ships, or 185,000 TEU, of which 23 are owned by shipping lines, down from 39 last month. Shipping lines are under pressure from declining rates, which recently reached their lowest level since September 2009. But so far, there has been no indication that the lines have any plans to withdraw capacity in order to push rates up, as they did in November 2008 when the idled fleet reached its highest ever level. In fact, Alphaliner has suggested that the number of idle vessels could decrease further over the coming months as carriers reintroduce ships to prepare for volume increases during the up-and-coming peak season. Right, so moving on to the 3rd most read story of the week, with 1,055 views. It's lines calling at Tokyo ports after radiation fears subside. The majority of the world's biggest shipping companies are continuing to call at ports in the Tokyo Bay area after fears of radiation levels have been eased. But a number of shipping lines are still redirecting cargo from the ports of Tokyo and Yokohama following the collapse of Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant 220 kilometres to the north of Tokyo. The US Navy has told reporters that any radiation on vessels which has leaked from the power plant can be washed off with soap and water, though. So 5 of the 6 biggest container lines, including NYK Line and K Line, are maintaining normal services to Japan. However, Germany-based line Hapag-Lloyd continues to omit Tokyo, Yokohama and Nagoya from its sailings, but it's retaining its calls to Kobe. Evergreen Marine said it is serving the ports in the Tokyo Bay area as normal, while Maersk Line, MSC and CMA CGM are continuing to call at the Japanese ports as scheduled. The 2nd most read story of the week, with 1,261 views, is falling rates could cost top ocean carriers $13 billion this year. The figure is an estimate from Sea Intel Maritime Analysis based on freight rate statistics from the Shanghai Shipping Exchange, which measures the development in spot rates on main trades out of Shanghai. In 2010, the average freight rate for main haul routes, which includes Trans-Pacific, Asia to US East Coast, Asia Northern Europe and Asia Mediterranean, was $3,083 per FEU, a figure which is expected to fall 28% to $2,219 per FEU this year. Sea Intel said this trend could be extended to all trade lanes. It said that most other trades globally have been seeing consistent declines, and if we assume an average of top 10 carrier has 25% of its volume locked into long-term contracts at 2010 levels, valid until 2012, and we further assume that other trades only decline at half the rate of the main haul, 14%, the carrier would still face an average freight rate decline of some $380 per FEU in 2011. Any decline in the freight rate has passed right through to a carrier's bottom line. Intel said it had been estimated that the top 10 container carriers would transport 35 million FEU this year, and using its estimate of an average rate decline of $380 per FEU, this would see turnover by these carriers plunge $13.3 billion on 2010, which could result in net losses for the year. Right, and on to the most read story of the week, which was viewed 1,315 times. It's Asia to Europe rates hit lowest point since 2009. Freight rates have continued to tumble over the last few weeks, almost dipping below the $1,000 per TEU mark on the Asia to Europe trade. The latest Shanghai Containerized Freight Index shows prices on the 4 main trade lanes fell in the week ending 20th of March from the week before. Rates are now at their lowest point since September 2009, and with no capacity reductions yet announced by shipping lines, observers said planned rate increases were looking less and less likely. Prices from Shanghai to North Europe fell to $1,019 per TEU from $1,076 the previous week, while rates from Shanghai to ports in the Mediterranean slumped to $1,001 from $1,042. Meanwhile, rates from Shanghai to the US West Coast slipped $37 to $1,617 per FEU, and rates to the East Coast fell $41 to $2,821 per FEU. However, some freight forwarders have reported shipping lines quoting rates as low as $800 per TEU on services from Shanghai to the UK. Right, so that concludes the top 5 most read stories of the week. For more news, you can visit ifw-net.com, or alternatively you can take part in industry discussions by tweeting us at twitter.com/ifwnet, or by liking our page on Facebook, which is facebook.com/newsifw, or you can join our LinkedIn group where you just go and search for IFW Cargo and you will find us.